Hi. Okay. So this is Matt Holloway. I'm going to share with you sort of what I'm proposing to do and why we're proposing to do it. So this proposal comes, the need for it comes out of the Foundation Budget Review Commission, their final report from this October. And this commission is tasked with essentially taking a long look at the foundation budget formula. So in Massachusetts, school funds are distributed according to a foundation formula, and that's something that's supposed to be renewed every so many years. So you can see, and I'm going to kind of cruise through the overall report because, as you can imagine, it's pretty involved. The thing that is kind of motivating our research is a request that the Foundation Budget Review Committee made for a deeper look at the cost of in-district special education. So this is an important definition. We're talking about kids who stay in the district and receive their special education services there in their home schools. The commission identified the fact that even if all their recommendations were fully implemented, there would still be a gap of 700 million between how much money the foundation budget assumed it should cost to teach these kids and how much the actual reported cost was. And so they say that some evidence and testimony was presented that the central change driving that gap was that the original foundation budget was built on a model of substantially separate instruction, which has changed significantly over time to reflect the growing use of inclusion as the preferred pedagogical model. And so we're going to explore what that means right now, because I want to make sure that all the definitions are clear. So this is the kind of report that the Department of Education publishes around rates of inclusion for kids with disabilities. And you see here, we've got the list of all the districts in the state. We've got the list of total, the number of total students, the number of total students with disabilities, SWD, the rate at which kids are identified as students with disabilities. And then we have, this is the rate at which students with disabilities are included in the general education setting. So this first group is the full inclusion group, and they're the ones who are in general education for 80% or more of the time. The second group is the partial group. They're between 60 and 80% of the time. And then this is the substantially separate group, who are below 60% of the time in with their general education peers. And you can see that these full inclusion numbers are quite a bit bigger than the partial, and then much bigger than the substantially separate, which is all helpful. And then I want to give a little bit of national context too before we get into the data, because I think it's important to think about, where do we sit in terms of the rest of the country. So this is the entire country, and this is their rate of full inclusion here. So starting with Alabama, who is all the way up at 83%. You have Alaska, 77, Nebraska, 76, Vermont, 74. These are the average rates of full inclusion. So 74.58% of the kids in North Dakota who have disabilities are included fully in their school day. And that's like 80% or more of the time. We go all the way down to here to find Massachusetts way down at 61.39%. So that's significantly lower than the high flyers, the national high flyers. And then there are some who are lower than us too. Hawaii is at 36, New Jersey is at 44. So we're bottom third of the pack there. And you might be asking yourself, well, is it a good thing to be fully included or not? And that's something that we want to address kind of briefly by looking at the reports of Dr. Tom Hare and Associates. Dr. Hare is a Harvard professor, but he is the former special education director of Boston Public Schools, and also the former director of special education for the Federal Office of Special Education. So Dr. Hare is a Harvard professor, and the most kind of significant overall finding that we have here, and again, these are really rich and detailed reports, but the most significant overall finding for our purposes is this one here. Students with disabilities who had full inclusion placements appeared to outperform similar students who are not included to the same extent in general education classrooms. And, there's an abundant research base, but we're not really focused on the pedagogical outcomes right now. So what we're going to try to do is stick closer to finance, since that's the question that the foundation budget raised for us, that commission raised for us. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to take a look at spending. So here we have a list of the districts in Massachusetts, and I'll show you what these columns are. So columns A and B represent in-district special education costs. So column A is special education teachers, column D is other instructional costs. And then C and D, these represent out of district. So this is when we send kids out of their home districts into private schools elsewhere or public schools. And then this column gives you the combined special ed expenditures. Okay, so let's just bear that in mind for a minute. We have this data here, in-district spending for the cost of special education. So what we did was we took the in-district spending and we compared it to, so here we have the rate of in-district spending, that's adding together the teachers and the other costs. We compared it to the total operating budget in the district, and we figured out what was the percent spending, what percent of this operating budget went towards in-district sped costs. And so for Abington, that was about 15%, Acton 18, Acushnet 13, and you see there's a range of different amounts here. And then this, again, we've already seen this. This is the full inclusion rate, and so that's what we're going to compare. We're going to compare the rate of full inclusion to the rate of in-district sped cost, because you remember that what that foundation budget hypothesis said was that they thought that in-district sped spending was driven up by that full inclusion rate, and so we're going to try to explore that statistically and see if it's true empirically. So what we do is we take this chart here. We broke the state up into districts by size. So group 1, if you look at the tab here, group 1 has 10 to 50,000 students in it. And you see here that this is the rate of full inclusion. And this is the percent of operating costs that went for in-district sped. So no real correlation there. This is districts between 5 and 10,000 students, districts between 2 and 5,000 students, 1 and 2,000, and 0 and 1,000. And this makes it a little bit easier to see. But we don't see any real correlation here, but we are missing a couple of key things that we would want to control for if we were actually going to do this study. And probably the most important thing that we would need to control for is this rate, is the rate of kids with disabilities in the district. So we can imagine that a district who has identified 9.2% of the kids, like Belmont, that district is going to have a lower in-district spending rate than a district like Amesbury, who has identified 19.3% of the students. So we need to control these data here. We need to control this here, this in-district sped as a percent of overall budget. We need to control that by the rate of identification in the district. So that's one thing we'd have to control. There are other things that we would want to look at that include the high cost students. So some students are really expensive to educate, and districts keep them at home in the district. And so we'd have to find a way to factor in those students who are really high cost students to educate as a part of that analysis as well. But overall, that's kind of the goal of this is to look at in-district special ed spending as a correlation or not to the rate of inclusion, and just to kind of empirically determine, is that Foundation Budget Commission hypothesis true? Is it really more expensive to include kids in the regular education classroom? So if we make some progress with that, and I suspect we will, and we find that there are some districts who are able to include students for relatively low cost, then we might want to jump over here to this other really helpful tool, which is called the DART tool, and it's the District Analysis and Review tool. And what it has that is really helpful for us is this, it breaks down the ratios, the student-teacher ratios over time. So we can see that, for example, in Chelsea, the number of kids with disabilities to the number of SPED teachers was 10.2 to 1. So that's kind of the student-teacher ratio for special ed in Chelsea. And we see that number has gone down a lot from 2014 to 2015, which is probably a good sign for the kids. However, financially, it's going to be a tough thing. And we also see that the rate of paraprofessionals has gone up. And that's an interesting finding as well. And that may be something that we would want to dig into further with this analysis. So that's kind of the big picture of what the analysis analysis is proposed to be. And I really hope that it's clear that an analysis like this, being asked for by a commission like this, could make some real impact in the way that Massachusetts funds. Number one, funds education, but also number two, what kinds of education we promote. We have such a strong network of private schools in this state, and we put a lot of money behind sending kids to those schools. Remember, 10,000 kids are sent off to those schools, costs over $2 billion to educate them. So, there are some policy questions that come up as a result of this analysis. And I do hope that we have the chance to actually undertake it, because it's clearly something that's much needed. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to try to stop the broadcast now.